Our investigation into the murder of Mr. Richard Barker, chairman of the Board of Guardians, draws to a close. I made my way towards the boardroom of Gressenhall Workhouse to meet the suspects. Now, of course, if you have been following this case, you will have your own theories about the murder. But are you correct? Well, now would be a good time to decide who you think killed Richard Barker. Ladies and gentlemen, my apologies for inconveniencing you. But let us start from the beginning. The body of Mr. Barker was discovered by Mr. Fuller in the workhouse pool. He had drowned.
Yes, Detective, and from what you have told me, he must have been drowned at 9 o'clock, as his watch was stopped at that time. But I fail to understand why his shoe was found in the burial ground.
That is simple, Mr. Fuller, because he did not walk to the workhouse pool. He was dragged there. The shoe must have fallen off on the way. Do you not remember that the back of his jacket was torn?
But how could my husband have been dragged to the pool? Was he dead already?
All in good time, Mrs. Barker. Of course, we now know that before he was drowned, Mr. Barker suffered a blow to the base of his skull from a heavy, blunt object. But what could this object be?
The hammer! The hammer Plowright uses to beat the oakum. The doors of the workhouse were open last night, and there was oakum found on the body.
What was that, Grieve? Oakum? But yes, you are right. Plowright's hammer is missing, and he has been known to wander the workhouse at night. But why would he strike Mr. Barker and drag his body through the workhouse and down to the pool on the off chance that we would think he had drowned? Why not just finish him off there and then? And another thing that puzzled me. The oakum that was found on Mr. Barker's body, it was quite dry. It had not been in the water.
I suppose you're going to say that I did him in with a cold iron. I'd have liked to, I can tell you. Well,
Calm yourself, Nancy Flowerdew, calm yourself. As I'm sure you were going to tell us, you were locked in the unmarried mother's ward last night, and there was no question at all of those doors being unlocked. Unmarried mothers in the workhouse corridors after dark? I think not.
Well, then what could have caused the wound?
Oh, I don't know, Mrs. Barker. There was a heavy brass candlestick in the boardroom. I would have thought that would do the job nicely.
How dare you, Detective? My husband lies dead
And there was clearly a disagreement between you and your husband last night, and I do not think that your wedding ring fell from your finger by accident. I believe you threw it at your husband in a fit of rage. But why? Nancy Flowerdew, what was it you said to Mrs. Barker yesterday about Miss Bacon?
Oh, in trouble again, am I? I said she should find out why her husband gave the job of workhouse cook to that Lizzie Bacon.
Miss Bacon, how long have you been cook in this workhouse?
6 months. And before that, I was in service with Mr. Barker for 3.5.
No, that is not quite right. You did not come to the workhouse straight from service with the Barkers. First, you returned to your parents' home, did you not?
Yes.
For how long?
For about 9 months.
And now all becomes clear, Mrs. Barker. Elizabeth Bacon left your service because she was with child, your husband's child.
I had known that something was wrong, but I did not want to admit it to myself.
Miss Bacon, I imagine your parents were able to hide your pregnancy, sending you away to be looked after by relatives before it showed. And your child, does it live?
Yes, Detective. A beautiful little boy. I called him Richard. He is cared for by a woman who looks after him as though he is her own. But I must pay her.
You must pay her. And so, we come to the note found in Mr. Barker's pocket, written by you on kitchen paper. What did it say? It is not enough. I will wait for you after the meeting.
I told Mr. Barker that I needed money for the upkeep of the child. He offered so little. So I wrote the note, telling him I would name him as the father of the child if he did not pay more.
And did Mr. Barker come?
Yes, but he became angry with me. I thought he was going to strike me, and I was afraid for my life.
Detective, do you not remember that the wound was to the back of Mr. Barker's head? How could Miss Bacon have done this?
You are right, Mr. Fuller. Miss Bacon did not strike Mr. Barker, though she watched it happen. The blow was struck by someone else, someone who cared very deeply for Miss Bacon. Mr. Scrivener, you told us that Mr. Barker had been beaten like a dog. How did you know that he had been beaten?
Oh, it's true, all true. I went to see Elizabeth to tell her that the Guardians had agreed to allow me an evening out of the workhouse each week. I was so happy. We would be able to meet in East Dereham. But as I approached, I heard Mr. Barker's voice, and I saw him advance upon Miss Bacon. Well, what could I do? I just picked up the first thing that was to hand. A rolling pin, I think, and I struck him with all my might. He fell like a stone. And now I must pay for my crime, I know.
You carried Mr. Barker from the kitchen to the girls' schoolyard?
Yes. Elizabeth was beside herself, and I needed time to think. So we hid the body in the shadows. Miss Bacon, she left to go home, and I went to settle the boys down. Now, Detective, I may have killed Mr. Barker, but I don't understand what happened after that. I know that I returned to the girls' schoolyard at 9:30, and the body had just disappeared. No, I swear to it.
I believe you, Mr. Scrivener, for you did not kill Mr. Barker. You merely knocked him unconscious. No, many people may have wished Mr. Barker dead, but there was only one murderer. A man afraid he was to be sacked. A man full of petty spite who came upon the unconscious body and took his revenge. William Grieve, the porter.
What? Now I know you're having a laugh, Detective, but,
I'm afraid not, Grieve. You know far too much for an innocent man. You knew that Mr. Barker had drowned and told me he had had one drink too many. You were first to spread rumours that Mr. Barker had killed himself. Of course, you didn't know about the wound to his skull and hoped we would think he had committed suicide by throwing himself in the pool. When it became clear that this was a murder, you decided to place the blame upon Plowright. Plowright was surprised to see you hanging about the men's workyard early this morning. I imagine you took your chance to take some oakum. Dry oakum, mind you. Go to the morgue and place it in Mr. Barker's coat pocket. Why, only a few minutes ago you told me that oakum was found upon his body. How could you know this? The last stage of your plan was simple. Tell Mr. Fuller that the doors to the men's ward were left open last night so that we would believe Plowright assaulted Mr. Barker whilst wandering about the workhouse.
you are forgetting, Detective. It can't be me. Miss Bacon will swear on oath that I was in the porter's lodge at 9 o'clock when Mr. Barker's watch stopped.
What? Am I mistaken? It must be Grieve.
Detective, I think you're forgetting something. The workhouse clock.
Of course, Miss Bacon, you are right. This workhouse does not stand alone. It reflects the good and the bad of the world around it. It is not the cause of poverty. It does not decide how the rich should think of the poor or how men should think of women. But it is still its own little world, and this world is run by the workhouse clock, which determines when the poor shall wake, when they shall work, when they shall eat, and when they shall sleep. And it is also a clock which runs a quarter of an hour fast. Miss Bacon told us she left the workhouse at 9 o'clock, but she was wrong. It was really a 9:15. 15 minutes before Mr. Barker's watch stopped, allowing you, William Grieve, ample time to leave the porter's lodge, discover Mr. Barker's body, drag it down to the workhouse pool, and commit the crime. William Grieve, I arrest you for the murder of Mr. Richard Barker.
He deserved it! He deserved it!